Alright. Welcome back to the podcast. So, I think this is a topic I said I would try to circle back to. So, since I've been talking about censorship in some places, we're kind of circled back to this topic of censorship that is more specifically censorship that seems like it's discriminatory against LGBT people who are content creators. So I'm going to break this down based on a YouTube video that was recently posted. The name of the YouTube channel is called We're Having Gay Sex. So we already know what it's about. So to describe that podcast a bit for people who might not be too familiar, Ashley Gavin is a lesbian comedian who, during the Rona, started a podcast. So it's kind of like a comedic kind of interview, usually of other queer content creators that have some form of humor to them, or just people who are comedians in general, or people who are just content creators that might not even be queer people. She tends to have a wide range of people on there, from races, gender identities, different ethnicities, different places. Some of it is in person. She's based in New York. Some of it is at different hotels when she travels around, or at other places, and some of it is remote video chats being recorded that way. And pretty much it provides a form of sex positive content where, it's not really for a crowd that's under 18, but it's definitely, content where, if people want to listen to people talk about stories about their sexuality, the main, premise of that whole podcast is, the concept we're having gay sex. And so she kind of makes that the topic, and everyone has an opportunity to go around and either talk about a recent experience or past experience, or just any topic that they want to talk about. They don't have to talk about their sex lives or whatever. I mean, some people talk about clothing styles, or what it's like to do their job, or like different types of weird situations that come up. The majority of it is sexual content, as far as like the story shared, but then there's also a lot of banter and comedy and plays on words. And so Breanna Williamson at this time, in this specific episode, was the co-host. Now Ashley Gavin's podcast tends to kind of rotate out different co-hosts, and I think on her Patreon the other co-host is there a lot too. And so in this specific episode, she interviewed, so her and Breanna Williamson. Breanna Williamson is another lesbian content creator. She's based in Canada, and she knows a lot of other famous YouTubers. She's one of the millennial generation, Caucasian lesbian creators. So she's been around for a while online, And she has her own podcast and everything too, and a bunch of other stuff that she does creatively. I don't know what's going on. It's like somebody upstairs that sounds like they're... I don't know what that noise is. It was happening earlier and I thought somebody was sweeping. Anyways, so basically, the people being interviewed, the guests in the episode their names are, well, let me see. The podcast title or their YouTube channel is called What's the Safe Word? Watts, like WATTS. I've talked about all of these people before. So the cast of that YouTube channel, they're these Kingster guys. They've got some kind of a relationship dynamic. There's Amp and there's Christopher, but Amp is considered a pup and Christopher is his, he's Mr. Christopher, basically. Kind of like an old guard, Dom type. And so basically, I'm linking that to the notes. I'm linking this episode of Ashley Gavin's to the notes, and putting the link and at the timestamp of approximately 26 minutes, 52 seconds until about the 33-minute mark. That's the length of the conversation that has to do with some type of censorship, discrimination, suppression, whatever you want to call it. So, jumping on into this. When it comes to censorship, a lot of us know that we're protected. We're protected against, inequality, basically. Everyone has the right to say pretty much what they want to say. You can't slander people or defame characters, and there's some legality to things, but overall we have freedom of speech. Now, that usually expands into the social media content world, where you can post whatever it is that you want to post. Excuse me. I've been coughing a lot in the last hour or so. I've got some water. So, yeah, there's this right that we have to have freedom of speech, but when it comes to social media, it's not uncommon that certain things are not allowed. Certain platforms don't allow certain things. And that's all good and well if they want to say, okay, this is banned, but when it starts being more commonly banned from one group compared to another group, I mean, you see this racially as well. Black content creators don't get the same algorithm push, publicity, exposure as white content creators. That's very true. And even me saying something like that, it can potentially get an episode like this banned. Now, this episode that I'm posting is likely already gonna get demonetized just because of the links that I'm leaving in the description, because it has words like gay and queer and LGBTQ plus and kinkster and links to podcasts and titles of, YouTube channels that are, and YouTube content creators that are queer creators. Likely it's not gonna go very far. I already know that. So at this point, it's like sometimes you gotta take advantage of the fact that you're already gonna get banned and just say what you gotta say. So Ashley Gavin makes a point that a lot of LGBT creators tend to use other things like Patreon or other platforms where they have more freedom and they can monetize directly and not get their monetization and ads and things banned or censored. It's one thing for your content to be cut down. It's another thing, there's issues with hashtags. So I'm going to go into some specific examples that they mention. And you can tell me if you think this is discrimination. Because censorship is one thing, but it's different when one group is censored more than the other. So think about it, right? If I'm a black person and I'm advertising a pair of sneakers, right, compared to a white content creator who's advertising in English in the same area, uploading the same time, the same pair of sneakers. Now, definitely the algorithms consider a lot of things like subscriptions and comments and likes and all these types of things. But all those things aside, let's say that it was the same amount of subscribers, the same amount of time being able to monetize, the same amount of all the other things. It's very likely that the white YouTubers' content will blow up faster than the black YouTubers' content, especially if the black YouTuber has previous content where you can see that they're a black person. Now, the reason why I mention sneakers is because if someone's showing sneakers, you don't have to really show your face. You don't really have to show your hands. You don't really have to show any part of your body that would be skin exposed, so nobody would really fully know what your race is. They can maybe tell by your, the vocal quality of your voice, or if you have an accent of some kind, or just terminology used. People can make assumptions about race that way. People can also make assumptions about race based on all kinds of things, right? But, if I had a series of past YouTube history videos that I've already put out, people could recognize my voice and notice that, even if you're not shown in this video, it's likely you, I'd still be identifiable as myself because I sound like myself, so it would be obvious that it would be me wearing the sneakers, even if there was no skin tone being shown. And, that's something as a black content creator that you worry about, because you're like, well, if I don't say anything and if I'm not visibly seen, nobody's gonna really fully know. But, I say my race pretty often, and I do have a bit of a presence online, and so it's, I'm not trying to deceive people or lie, but it definitely is a detriment to your brand to be a black person, an openly out black person on the internet. Your content is not treated the same. It's not treated the same on Instagram. It's not treated the same on YouTube. Multiple people have spoken to this, and it doesn't even have anything to do with gender or sexuality or any of those types of things. So fast forward, we would say that's not equality, right? That's not equal. If I could advertise the same things as another race of person and not get as much publicity just solely because the race is different. That's not okay, right? I think we can all agree with that. Now, if we fast forward to this topic, talking about censorship with LGBTQ plus populations of people, the queer population has the same issue. Queer people compared to non-queer people. Now, this is genderqueer, sexuality queer, LGBT. A lot of times I say queer just to refer to everybody because, I can go down the whole, gay alphabet of all the LGBTQIA everything, I'm not going to say that the whole time. So when I say queer, I just basically mean not straight. Not straight, not cis. The hetero cis culture, I guess, queer can refer to, gender related things or sexuality related, but I'm lumping things all into kind of one thing. So it could be either, a non-cis person. You can be a non-cisgender person and be straight. You can be gay and be cisgender. You can be bi and be cisgender, so I'm not going to go into describing the whole thing. I've described it multiple times. Look it up. If you don't know what it is, look it up, get a refresher. But basically, when it comes to queer content and comparing that to cis straight content, it's been proven that a cis straight person can do something and a queer person can make a very similar type of video, but the queer person's video will get banned and the straight video will not get banned. So, for example, if it's a cis straight couple, man, woman, sitting there in their bedroom and talking about some brand of lingerie, trying it on, wearing it, they're fully clothed the whole time, wearing some kind of lingerie that's not exposing any kind of body parts, no breasts, no nipples, no cracks, no cleavage, no nothing. It might not get banned. It probably won't get banned. It's almost like bathing suits. It's not really going to get banned. But you put two lesbians in a room and have them talking about lingerie for lesbian, say it's a topic that's addressing lesbian bed death with lingerie options or something along those lines. I don't know. Let's say that's a video title. That video is likely going to be demonetized. It's likely, going to get basically the restrictions placed on it by YouTube will be specifically different for the queer couple than it would be for the straight couple. Now that's not equal. And this happens even with the same products. Now, what is the difference, Because, I've talked about this before, that, queer culture is definitely sexualized. I've talked about it before, how I've even talked about having certain people in my life that, were maybe a little too nosy. Now, I don't really mind. There's certain close friends that I will talk about anything with them. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the other people that it's none of their business, and we don't even talk about, sex lives or anything along those lines. And so why all of a sudden are they asking me that kind of thing? Just because they find out that I'm not a straight person, now they need to know or want to know or get curious about all these other things, you know, to me that just becomes like a super awkward thing. And especially when it's like very one-sided. Like, I've definitely noticed with those situations, there's a whole other episode and I've talked about it before, but I've definitely noticed with those types of situations that those types of people aren't like equally revealing about their lives. They tend to be very one-sided and talk very much like being inquisitive and curious about my life, but they're not like sharing about their life on the same level. And so to me it just becomes a little too intrusive, and I deal with it. Like, it's not like a big deal, but it's low-key almost a form of harassment. But I kind of, you know, I feel like if I can set boundaries around it, I wouldn't consider it harassment. It becomes harassment when a boundary has been set and then somebody crosses that boundary. But so but by far, you know, when it comes to sexual content, most of us were raised on straight sexual content. Like, all the movies that I saw and shows that I saw growing up with kissing or any kind of make out things or whatever, probably over 90%, over even 95% of the content I've consumed in my life, maybe even more than that, the majority of it is very straight. And there's always a little bit of, you know, the Hollywood equation of, add some sex, add some violence, add some special effects, add a little bit of comedy, and some pretty faces, and it's the movie's gonna be a hit or the show's gonna be a hit. But I've definitely watched plenty of shows and movies and videos and series where there was some type of sexual scene that would occur. With, it could be anything as like innocent as hugging or kissing to like people actually having sex scenes. And if it's more like Showtime, HBO, that kind of thing, it might be a little more like Cinemax, that kind of stuff, like a little more exposed genitalia and stuff like that. But or into like, I think those channels have like actual porn. I don't know if they do anymore, actually. I don't know. That was a whole other time in my life, so I don't even know. But I know at least at one point in time in the 90s they did. So I don't really know what's going on now. Maybe they still do. I don't have any updates on that because I haven't checked. But I would say the majority of my life, I never really had like all those like Cinemax, Skinemax type of things. I've talked about the ones that I noticed when I first came across them ages ago, but that was in a whole other episode. But yeah, like the majority of things that I think the majority of us have grown up on has been straight sex, straight sexuality. And even a person like me who goes out of their way to consume a ton of queer content, still, with the amount that's coming out lately, there's not even that much in comparison to the other content that's out there that's not queer content. Like, there's far more straight content than there is queer content. There's just far, far, far more. The algorithm pushes things for me because it knows what I watch all the time. So the majority of stuff that gets like recommended to me is not going to be always the cis straight stuff, because I can't really care less. Like, I'm not really too tuned into it. Usually if there's not some kind of cultural factor either ancient or modern, if there's not some kind of diversity piece to it, I'm probably not going to watch it, in all honesty. If it's, and it's not because I'm not against white content, I'm not against straight content. It's just, I know those stories, I've seen them. Like, I don't feel like I need that much more indoctrination and brainwashing about that culture. Like, I need to learn about other stuff. And I know that maybe like social media, Hollywood media, that kind of stuff isn't like the best way to learn about diverse cultures and things, but it's a part of it, you know. Seeing how people get portrayed. And I'm not saying that the portrayal is always accurate. I think I talked about this before, or with somebody. We were talking about things, you know, it's different when a group writes about themselves. When a group writes about themselves versus when they write about someone else. Like another group. Like if I was going to make a movie about Japanese Americans, I mean, I could do all the research and everything, and even if I was raised in an area where there were plenty of them, I'm still not a Japanese American, so firsthand I don't have that experience. When people look at me, they don't see a Japanese American. But when people see me on paper, they also don't see a black female, a black queer female. That's not what people assume about me either. So that's a whole other topic of its own that I've probably spoken about that too. But yeah, it's not equal. Like the amount of sexuality that the majority of us have had, you know, if you even want to put the quotes of shoved down our throats, usually it's straight content that's getting shoved quite a bit. If you think of all the basic channels on television, like basic without cable or any satellite or anything, I don't know what they're even called anymore. I'm the worst person to talk about television. Like, I am by no means well versed in television. I don't know a thing about it. I'm like so ignorant. Like, it's almost like asking me about the newspaper. Like, I don't read it. I don't really consume a lot of content from there. I watched a little bit of the X Games the other day, and since then, I don't think I've watched much other than some basketball games when the Lakers started doing better, and I watched some World Cup soccer. And it's not even every day or every weekend or even once a week that I watch TV. And when I do watch, it's usually sports, and then usually whenever there's commercials, I usually turn the sound off or try my best to ignore it because I hate commercials so much. Commercials are definitely brainwashing. In case you don't know that, it is. A lot of media is brainwashing, but yeah, I think I'm maybe getting a little off topic, but basically I'm just trying to play with the idea that there's a certain form of censorship that is discriminatory. When you see it with races, you definitely notice, you're like, ooh, like that doesn't really feel right, thinking that, you know, black people's content isn't going to be, you know, pushed as much as a white person's content. Like, that doesn't even seem like something that an algorithm would pick up, but it does. It picks it up. It knows. Somebody's writing this code, somebody's writing it in so that it purposely does that. And that's where the bigger problems are coming in, is that the people who are working in those positions for these platforms are the ones who are deciding what we can and cannot see. And I mean, I'm not even talking about kids or anybody under 18 or someone with a specific religious viewpoint or whatever. I'm talking about, you know, the people who consume all the other stuff anyways. You know, if you're going to be on the HBO and Showtime and watching all those kind of shows anyways, I mean, it's kind of like, You're already seeing sex and violence and all that stuff anyways. So for it to be very homogenous for most of our lives, it's a problem. Because people get used to seeing certain stuff, and then they don't get exposure to other things. And because they don't get exposure to it, they're a little weirded out by it. I mean, I know a lot of this isn't really about race, but it's easier just to use race because I feel like that's something that most people would say. I believe in equality and equality of races. I think most people would say that. We all have our prejudices. I have mine. We all have our own. I try not to let my prejudices get in the way of how I treat people. I try to challenge them. Some of them I don't even notice. But a lot of my prejudices come from the first-hand experiences I've had in my life with certain types of people. I can't help that, I think a certain way or feel a certain way around certain people, especially when they're doing certain things or saying or acting certain ways. I'm pretty sensitive to it because I'm like, whoa, like that's not okay, But to them, they don't have to think about that kind of stuff because to them, it's okay. They can get away with it. In their social groups, when there's nobody who's like me, they can do and say those things. And so I get it. And there's a learning curve with it. And, I'm pretty patient. I'm not going to write somebody off for using derogatory terms and things like that. Especially if they're not cussing me out and saying it directly at me. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's not it doesn't feel good to hear, but at the same time it's whatever, they weren't calling me that. And then I think when people kind of just aren't doing it all the time, I wouldn't feel comfortable if I was around someone who was a non-black person who was always using the N-word. That would be weird, that's strange. I don't even really like it when black people say it, but, people are going to say what they're going to say, right? It doesn't really mean that they're, a bad person or I shouldn't be around them just because they use certain language or terminology, but I think at a certain point it's kind of worth a conversation. If it is bothering me, if it keeps going on, it'll be a conversation that I'll be willing to bring up. Just to at least let somebody know how I feel about it. But I'm not even really talking about race. I feel like people can understand if I'm talking about race when it starts to be topics about sexuality. I think people are so it's such a loaded thing that many people get a little automatically about certain things, and it's I mean, I don't know if straight people, I just don't know, because I'm not one, so there's certain things I just don't know, so, I would be curious to know if straight people are what's going on out here? Yeah, I'd want to know if straight people are kind of kind of what they think about some of these topics, Caucasian, cis, white, straight people. because I'm not any of those. You know, so I just wonder, because I've always been like the other type of person, another, on multiple different levels. I've always been like the other, like, so I always wondered what it would be like to be of the majority culture, having my own culture, and people who look like me being publicized and visible. You know, I look around and everyone in the classroom looks like me, and I look at TV and everybody looks like me, and all the movies are about my culture, and all the movies and all the stuff that I read and all the books I had in class is specifically about my culture. And, everybody doesn't like assume certain things about me as I go through the world, versus when you're not any of those things. You can get to a point where nothing looks like you and nothing represents you, fully the majority of your life, and that's pretty much how my life has gone. Is like I'm not like sad about it, but that's definitely how my life has gone. Like, I've had, not a lot of people around me who look like me, who think like me, a lot of that, and it's fine, but also I've always had to challenge things. And I feel like sometimes when someone is part of a majority culture in any way, they don't have to think things through on certain levels about certain stuff. Like, they just don't have to think about it. Like, I think when it comes to cis straight people, when it comes to sexual content, they don't have to think about it, because their sexual content represents their lifestyles, and usually it's quite a vanilla lifestyle. There's kind of this whole scenario that everybody's supposed to follow these rules of dating at a certain age and getting engaged at a certain age and getting married and having kids and all that. It's supposed to flow in certain age ranges in a certain way, and it's supposed to look a certain way and come out a certain way. When you're a queer person, your life doesn't look like that. You're probably not dating at the same ages that the straight people are dating at, because, the majority of queer people don't always live in the safest of environments where they can date at school or date at church or date anywhere in their neighborhood or whatever, or have the freedom to even leave town and go to the gay area of town if they don't already live there, and go to the center and like meet other people even in high school that are like their own age range. Like, you don't usually have that. And so it's not uncommon for queer people to start dating more queer people, or whatever their preference may be, to be dating them when they're older, like out of their parents' house, or have more independence financially, so that if, the poop hits the fan, you're not left homeless or stranded or kicked out or disowned, So it's kind of like, you have to think about things like, oh, is it even safe to date this person? How much is this worth the risk? How in love am I? Like, if I'm not really in love, I'm not going to put my safety on the line, for this person. There's not a whole lot of room for like flexibility if you're like 16 years old. When you start getting a little older, it's more common to be able to kind of experiment with more things, with more people. But again, it's not the same. Like, you're not in your, maybe age like 18 to like 25 or so, trying to find the one to marry. Like, you're barely starting to date, and dating for queer people doesn't even look the same as it does for straight people. So it's kind of, if you just take early dating as a thing, it's really hard to even explain. But I'm not even gonna go past and like explain the whole thing. But it's, when you have to live your life thinking about so many different things, I think there is a difference, to, like, queer people are very aware of their queerness, I'm very aware of, like, I code switch like nobody's business. Like, I don't think I appear like a very straight person, but I can definitely, like, I keep my maybe sexual opinions and things, I tend to keep it to myself for the most part. Like, when I'm with certain people, I'll joke around about dumb, like, sex jokes about whatever, but usually I'm not making those kind of jokes, and when I am, I know it's going to be well received. I'm not going to be, like, offending some stranger. You know how to act. If I'm in the women's room, I know how to act. If I'm in the women's fitting room, I know how to act. Like, there's certain stuff where you're like, I'm just not going to draw attention to myself. I'm going to take off my hat so people see that I'm not a man. It's like, there's certain little things that you just know to do just because you don't want to alarm anybody, who might not understand that I'm just here to pee, Like, I'm not trying to, like, do anything crazy, but there's discrimination all over the place, and I do think that's part of it. Queer people consuming content online compared to non-queer people consuming that same content, we look at it differently, we see it differently, different things hit us differently. We can all sit down and watch plenty of straight shows and straight movies with all the kissing scenes and all that kind of stuff, not think or say a thing about it. But gay people tend to be, even when we're out, we're closeted, we're not out in every environment 100% all the time, all of us. If we all were, then it would be obvious that there are way more gay people than it even might seem like. But the world appears quite straight. When you're just walking through it, it tends to appear quite straight. And so I do understand how maybe when there's non-straight content, it seems so rare to people who are not straight. Who are straight. It seems rare to them to see non-straight content because in their lives, it's a very rare thing. Unless there's some kind of fetish or interest or curiosity, they're probably not searching for it. It's probably not getting, unless, I think it's different when straight people have queer friends and family, those people tend to know a lot. I feel like all the other people who don't know much of anything, unless they've studied or whatever, like, on their own. But I just feel like the bias factor really comes up when it comes to media. A lot of people don't realize how brainwashed we are by media in the first place. And so just seeing something, triggers an emotion in someone. Just hearing certain music in a certain movie, how to feel, if it's a mysterious scene, if it's a horror scene, if it's supposed to be funny. If you've ever watched a movie where the soundtrack is kind of off, like, what was that? There was a movie I watched that, like, had all these violent scenes where they were playing all these, like, upbeat kind of, like, fun songs in the middle of it, and it's like, it almost made the killing look like it was, like, not fun, that's not the right word, but it's like, they kind of gave it, like, a feeling of, like, oh, it wasn't, like, so heavily weighted just because, the music was funny. Like, it would be, like, fun music, and so you kind of felt a little, like, fun about it and, like, a little bit of laughter, even though everyone's getting murdered. But things like that, like, the music alone in a show or movie can kind of tell you how to feel. And so that's another thing too. I think a lot of people don't notice that they might have a bias for certain things, and it's okay. Like, if you don't have to watch, like, gay content, like, that's not what I'm even saying. I'm not saying people have to watch it. I'm I'm just saying I don't think it's right that it's not treated equally when people aren't doing anything against the rules. Like, I understand you can't be, like, exposing yourself all over the internet. Like, if you want to do that, there's places to go do it. You can't just do it, like, just, like, whipping things out all over the place. Like, that's not... Like, I'd understand, okay, yeah, that's gonna get banned. Like, nobody, people don't want their kids seeing that. Like, it's not, not everybody is, like, interested in seeing those things. So they do kind of keep it at a certain level of, like, for the more conservative approach, I would say. But I don't think the conservative approach needs to really take a cultural line and start altering what people can see culturally. I consider, if someone's not a cisgender person or if they're not a straight person, it's diversity of culture. That's what I see it as. It's culture. It's, this person just happens to be this way, just like I just happen to be a black person. It's a cultural factor. Like, it's not some other thing. And I think if people agree that, like, black people should be treated just like the white people, then I think, it makes sense that, the queer people should be treated like the straight people. Like, I don't understand, like, why it's different. Like, I do understand to some extent, like, but I just don't understand why it's different. When it's not breaking the rules of any platforms, I don't really see how they can justify banning and demonetizing, and just it's discrimination. So some of the things they mention, and I would, if you're interested in the video, I put the timestamp specifically so that you can see the timestamp. So if you don't want to see the whole other parts of the video, you can check out the other, you don't have to check out all the other stuff. And I understand people have their different levels of comfort with sexuality. I mean, I was raised in an ultra religious community, so it's like, obviously the first thing that you don't communicate about is sexuality because you're conservative, right? It's like there's certain things in conservative, really strict cultures that tend to be taboos. There's usually like some kind of taboo food. There's usually some kind of gender taboo related things where men don't do certain things and women don't do certain things. And there's certainly like sexuality taboos where there's certain types of sex that you're not supposed to be doing. And I'm not talking about like non-consensual things like something underage or something with kids or something with animals or some weird ass like creepy thing like that. Like, I'm not talking about like some kind of molestation or sexual things with people who can't consent or with beings of some sort that can't really speak for themselves. Like, I'm talking about consenting adults. There's no impairments involved, just two average consenting adults. Like, let's not add too many other variables and make it more complex than it needs to be. I'm just talking two consenting adult people where there's no weird power dynamics, nothing. That's mostly what I'm talking about. But so some of the things that were mentioned in the video, in case you don't watch it, I'm going to go through some of those things. So AMP was mentioning that they got video footage of someone describing why certain of their content got either taken down or demonetized, and they had video proof of someone who was in charge of the reviewing process. That person stated that it's because of the gays in the content, like, and they were trying to get clarification. It's like, just because the content itself was gay is why it was being restricted. That to me is almost like saying just because the content's black, they're going to restrict it. Like, that makes no sense to me. Just because there are gay people in it, like, they're not talking about an action. They're not talking about anything. Just there's gay people there. Because there's gays in it, that's a restriction. So Ashley Gavin, and I'm going to put this all in the notes. So Ashley Gavin had a point that the reviewer, the people who are reviewers who are going through the content saying thumbs up, thumbs down, those reviewers have a form of an internal bias. Now, the internal bias is similar to a lot of the stuff I was just speaking about, so I'm not going to repeat it all because it was very lengthy, but just kind of how we were raised to see, like, we all were exposed to, cis straight content growing up, we were all, that's kind of considered like the cultural norm in the majority of cultures to see cis straight content. So we all are biased in that way that we usually are used to that. And it hasn't been until the millennial generation, really, that there was a lot of mainstream queer stuff out there. Netflix has series, like there's a lot of series and stuff out there, but up until my lifetime, there wasn't really like a section where you could go and like click on something that happened to have a whole list of like LGBT stuff you could just watch, like Netflix is an easy example. Like there's a lot of categories on Netflix of types of content you can watch. So things like that. There's definitely an internal bias. We're definitely used to seeing certain things. Reviewers and non-reviewers alike. Anyone who consumes any form of content, you watch something, you're reading stuff, you're, going to plays, whatever it may be, you're consuming content of a certain kind. And the majority of it is cis straight content. Like, now there are queers everywhere. We're all over the dang place, but the content isn't always pushing or talking about any type of queer topic. And I think for that reason, it goes into the next topic where they start talking about that certain things feel more sexual versus a straight person. So Ashley Gavin gives the example of, if she makes a sexual joke as a comedian on stage, versus a straight male comedian making the same type of sexual joke about a woman or whatever, it's taken differently due to media norms, due to internal biases. People, when it is sexual content, people basically, there's input, there's a processing section before there's like an opinion, right? So you consume something, it goes into your mind, something in there is like processing what's going on, and then you form an opinion of it. It's all instantaneous. And so, unless you make it so it's not instantaneous, you can challenge anything at any time. And that's the beauty of it. Like, we can grow and we can expand our minds. We don't have to stay stuck in these like ancient, unhelpful ways of thinking, just because somebody in a Bible said it however many thousands of years ago, it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean that applies to the way I have to live my life today. There's plenty of stuff in those ancient texts, not just the Bible, but religions and other types of ways of believing that, most people can agree that there's some outdated information, People aren't like killing their babies and doing all kinds of like weird stuff because of some other thing. You know, there's certain things where we're like, okay, that's maybe wrong to do, you know, or wrong to think. You know, there's definitely some revised thinking as time goes on. You know, that's normal. The human mind should expand. It shouldn't have to stay trapped. But I'm not saying that tradition isn't important. I'm not saying that beliefs and faith aren't important. But I do think there's a difference between belief, faith, tradition, and prejudice and discrimination. And I think a lot of times people are afraid to go against maybe what they were brought up thinking, or, you know, they're afraid to challenge traditional beliefs because they think, well, I can't challenge this one thing, you know, even though I genuinely don't think, you know, like, that's very common, you know, with the Christian church, you know, for people to be like, well, I have to support that there's hatred towards queer people. I mean, there was a point in time when it was illegal for black and white people to marry each other. I mean, come on, guys, we've moved on, you know? There's a lot of things where people were interpreting certain stuff, like being unequally yoked. People assumed that that had to do with, you know, race. You can't be unequally yoked. You can't have two different races of people marrying each other. It has nothing to do with anything. If you know about yokes and oxen and farming, which is not a specialty of mine by any means, but usually what happens if you would yoke an animal, you would have, you've seen it, it's those like wooden things that they would put two animals, kind of combine them together so that their heads were like pretty much around the same like neck, like their necks were kind of like neck and neck. Something that would be equally yoked would be like the same size, same speed of animal attached to the other animal. That means that the work would be getting done similarly. If they're plowing, that's going to be very evenly plowed. Now you can also yoke a weaker animal to a strong animal, or maybe like a less less trained, less educated, less experienced animal that you want to learn the skills that an older animal knows. You can yoke a young oxen with an older one, and the young one will learn what to do by following the older one, because they're yoked, they're stuck together. That would be an unequal yoke, because they're two different animals, two different like quality of work is going to be done by these two different animals. And that's what yoking is about. It's not about races. But of course, a lot of the people who talked about these things in a lot of American Christian history don't really know Jewish culture and don't really know the origins of a lot of the things in the Bible. And so they were looking at it from American perspectives and kind of pushing political views based on that. And to think that people don't still do that today would be a very ignorant thing to think. People do still do it today. They still do it with race even, definitely with sexuality. And so when it comes to queer people and straight people, they're not treated equally by the church. They're not treated equally in society. They're not treated equally in the media. They're not treated equally even on YouTube. They're not treated equally by the algorithms. They're not treated equally by the reviewers who go through and actually watch and read content. So, yeah, when it comes to biases and norms, that's kind of what we see. I think most of us can agree that we weren't raised maybe like consuming majority of queer content. That's not how most people were brought up. Breanna Williamson mentioned that and I've seen some of these videos where she had some shorts that she posted called Gay Girl Tip. She'd be like, gay girl tip number 132 or whatever. And then she'd be like, don't wear, this type of nail polish or this length of nails or whatever. It would be like quirky, kind of like stereotypical queer types of fun topics that she would just make a short thing about how to maybe stand out if you're queer or not stand out or whatever. She said she posted nearly 250 videos, and at some point she could no longer use the hashtag #GayGirlTip. Now, it wasn't always I've seen a lot of them, but maybe not all of them, and I was wondering why. Actually, I hadn't seen them in a while, because they used to come up in my recommendations all the time, and then they just disappeared. So with Gay Girl Tip, it wasn't always like extra sexual stuff, but she was actually able to put out the tips at a certain point and use that hashtag to a certain extent, and then all of a sudden it wasn't okay. So what changed? It's not like she made one video that was like suddenly like alarming. Like, she was consistently posting those, and then they got taken, so she can't even use the hashtag anymore to promote her things. What is wrong with the hashtag #GayGirlTip? What is wrong with that? Like, if you're giving tips, what is wrong with it? What's wrong with it? Now, I'd understand if somebody was like, you need to age restrict this. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, unless it's like sexual content for 18 and older, I don't really see why just being gay needs to be censored, but I don't know. Apparently it's an issue. So we already talked about this, that, I think Amp and Mr. Christopher were saying that there was some difference between queer and straight creators when it was the same topics and same ideas. So they gave the example that there can be a straight couple putting on underwear, but when it's a gay male couple putting on, like, not putting on, like, they're not going from nude to like putting on underwear, but if they're like maybe modeling or like showing off lingerie as a straight couple versus like, a queer couple showing like certain brands of underwear or like harnesses or things like that, and then that stuff gets banned. And it's like, to me, it's like, okay, I was raised in such a conservative environment where I'm just like not fully understanding like how because the thing is, the way that I see it, like the way I was raised, and I don't believe this way anymore at all, but the way I was raised was to be very cautious about sexuality. So with the culture I was raised in, neither the lingerie with the straights nor the queer underwear or harnesses would be something that would be okay for that religion to be watching. It wouldn't be like acceptable. So for me, maybe because I was raised with it all being equally not okay. Well, it wasn't equally not, no, that's wrong. Like, definitely I was taught that the queer content was worse to consume than straight content. But overall, if it's sexuality, it's still not going to be acceptable to be like watching that kind of stuff. So channels get suppressed. They did talk at one point about a class action lawsuit, but I don't remember where that came up at. They talked about straight culture not being as sexualized as queer culture, so the loading of that is taken a little bit differently. just because I feel like I mentioned, like queer culture gets sexualized easily. I mean, the best example I have, honestly, is just those personal examples I talked about before, where, like maybe if somebody didn't know I was not a straight person, and then they learned later on that like if they didn't know at first, and then they learned later on that I'm a queer person, then maybe, then they're gonna start asking me all kinds of strange questions sometimes. Like the things I've heard people say that are like, if you take the roles, if you reverse it, it's just weird. Like, I think a lot of times straight people, maybe the very curious ones that don't even know a person well, like they just want to ask because they're curious. But it's weird sometimes, like especially if you don't know a person. Like I've literally met people, and the same day, they were like, well, I met them once while they were way under the influence. So the second time when I met them, I don't know if they remember me meeting them before, but I went over to talk to them because I recognized them from a few weeks before. And this person, after like a couple sentences of me just being like, hey, how are you doing? Kind of like a long time no see, like, just, it was a friend of a friend of a friend, so I was just, all the other people were talking to each other. There's this lady standing over there by herself that I like recognize. So I'm like, why don't I just go say hi? Like I saw no harm in it. Like, I feel like that's normal. And I go over to say hi to her and just said like 2 sentences, maybe 3 sentences of just like, what are you drinking? Just kind of catching up, kind of with somebody I don't even know. I don't even know her. And she tells me, I'm straight. And I'm like, I know, like I assumed, because she came in with the guy for the second time, and I don't know if I'm assuming she was saying that because she thought the reason why I was talking to her was for some gay reason. The only reason I was talking to her is because I recognized her from when she went to the Padres game, and my friends and I met up at a bar after that, and she came with them. And so that's why I remembered her. It had nothing to do. We were in a gay bar when I saw her the second time, and I was not hitting on her. I don't even hit on people. I was just talking like I would have talked to anybody else. I'm not even interested in her. I wasn't interested in her. I wasn't flirting. Nothing. Now, if the roles were reversed, right? If I was the person who had previously gone to a baseball game, come into a bar where there's a bunch of my friends, and I meet a friend of a friend that happens to be this straight dude. He comes up to me at that first bar, but it's kind of plastered that night. And then I meet 3 weeks later, I'm at a gay club with my friends, and he comes over and recognizes me and starts talking to me and just says like, oh, what are you drinking? Or oh, like I really like, I don't know, are you still listening to this kind of music, or like whatever, like a couple sentences. And if I just said I'm gay, I mean, like, what the like, I can't even imagine saying that to somebody. Like, I can't even imagine if some random straight guy was talking to me and I just automatically was like, I'm gay, like out of nowhere, just unprovoked, just like, oh, I'm gay. Or even if it's not a gay club, like what if it was a straight club? I don't know. Like, there's no way that scenario would make any sense, right? So I think sometimes that's what helps me the most, is to take different scenarios and kind of reverse them a little bit, And then I kind of see the problems and things, because I'm like, dude, if I did that to some dude, I'd be a jerk. Like, I can't even imagine assuming some guy is hitting on me after saying two things. If he's not acting flirty and he's just talking to me because he recognizes me from a few weeks ago, and I just happen to be standing by myself, and so is he, so he politely comes over to just, whatever, just small talk, chit chat over a drink or whatever, while all of our other friends are talking to each other. Like, what's the issue? Like, if I don't want to talk to him, I can say something or just walk away. I mean, that's the easiest thing, to be like, I'm going to take a lap or whatever and just walk away. Like, you don't really need, permission or whatever. But I also wouldn't say that to somebody. Like, unless they were being flirty, or unless they were like, oh, you want to dance, and then they're like grinding on you or something. Like, if someone's just casually talking, I would never assume, like, that I need to, like, tell them that I'm gay as a way to deter them from, like, speaking to me. Like, that is, like, the weirdest freaking thing. And I don't know what she was trying to accomplish by that when she said that she was straight to me. Like, I assumed that she didn't like me talking to her because she assumed I had some gay agenda, where I was just kind of thinking, like, dude, you're in my territory, and, like, it's not going to be uncommon that people are going to assume that a woman is gay in a gay club. But, I just don't know. Like, it's weird. That's not the only weird thing. Like, even when people, ask you, like, really weird stuff about your sex life, like, I've had it happen, like, right after work before, or, like, even when I go out, like, for a drink after work. There were some people I was trying to get to know at a certain point, and I guess one of them found out that I wasn't straight, and when I started talking, they started getting really nosy about everybody's dating life, and they would always circle back around to talk to me, and just, like, it seemed like they wanted to just, like, ask me stuff, because they asked me way more questions than they asked everybody else, and more intrusive questions. But I mean, the scenario, I'm just like, oh yeah, I went on this date the other night, just casually after work, over a drink, dinner, whatever we were doing. And then that person who barely knows me was like, oh, did you guys finger each other, or did you scissor? It's like, what the like, what am I supposed to say to that? You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, like, I mean, imagine that. You go out, if you're a straight couple and you go out with someone, or you're a straight person and you go out with someone, a guy goes out with a woman, or a woman, you go out with a guy, you come around your friends after work, or someone you're trying to get to know after work, and, you're having dinner with a bunch of other coworkers, and you tell them that you went on a date, and they're like, oh, did you... Like, they ask you, like, what kind of sexual thing, if you were doing some kind of specific sexual thing with those people. It's like, whoa, did you do it missionary or doggy? It's like, what? Like, I don't even know you. Like, what's your name again? But it's kind of like, you can see how that's weird, right? I think most people can see how that's inappropriate, But it's like, I think a lot of times when people know that a person is not straight, the first thing that comes to their mind is all the possible sexual stuff that goes on in their life. And so that's the only thing they can think about. They can't think about, hey, this person works and goes to school and goes to the gym and does other things that aren't about having sex with other gays. Has a whole life where they were productive and functioning and balanced. I mean, of course, there are going to be, like, sex addicts out there and all kinds of people doing stuff like that. They exist, straight or gay, whatever. But yeah, I just think it's just super weird. Like when people start like thinking about, okay, if I reverse this, I can kind of see how that would maybe not be okay, you know. Like it's not like a normal way to treat somebody, getting like all up in their business about their sex life when you don't even know them. It's like you know, like some people are really open to talking about that kind of stuff too. But I do think that queer people in general, like, people either really want to talk about it or they really don't want to talk about it. But there's definitely a lot of taboo around the culture, a lot of misunderstanding. Like, the part that I never understood, and this will be my last point because this is getting lengthy, but the part that I never fully understood, just on a social level in my personal life, isn't so much when people don't understand every little thing. Like, that's not a problem. But I get a little confused when it's like, you know, people can't really wrap their heads around, like, that we're people, like, that we live, like, normal lives. I don't know how come sometimes people think all of a sudden once they learn that somebody's not straight, you know, they have all these weird, you know, notions about what kind of strange perversions, like perversions in a negative way, you know, just like assuming that people are doing immoral, weird stuff. And it's not the same thing. Like, you know, like abusive people, molesters, pedophiles, rapists, those types of people, that doesn't really have anything to do with queer culture. I think in general, honestly, queer people, their sexuality is way more subdued because they know better than to get themselves into a situation. You know, as a minority, any minority knows their place of how to be, where to be, how you need to be to keep yourself out of trouble. It's a survival game. Like, if you don't know how to do that, you're not going to last very long in or be able to like easily adapt in society, or to a new neighborhood or whatever. Like, you learn the rules real quick for your kind. And so, you know, I don't know. I think I have a whole lot of questions. I don't really have a whole lot of answers, but I have a whole lot of questions for why, you know, queer sexuality is considered so negative. And I feel like it's weird because I feel like, yeah, people talk about it in religions a lot, and yeah, it's in a lot of religious texts, but it's not like the majority of what's in religious texts. Like, the texts talk about so much other stuff, so why, with a couple sex related things in there that happen to do with some kind of queer related thing that's usually taken out of context anyways, but, you know, why would people focus on that? You know, to me that just gets weird, because I'm like, when I even think about the Bible, it doesn't mention any type of I don't know, it's such a controversial topic and I don't really want to get into it, but basically, you know, the parts that are mentioned in Leviticus, like, if you see the word homosexuality in the first place, that is a more modern word. That is not an ancient term. So whatever the word was that was used, that was transferred to say the term homosexuality, is not what we call homosexuality. It was another thing that was happening at those ancient time periods that could have been either like an act of worship or a cultural lifestyle that was kind of based in just non-Jewish belief systems, with the hedonism and things like that, where people would sometimes maybe have practices of doing what you want to do. Just, you know, the Bible's big on like denying the flesh, denying anything natural versus, and we all know how that goes. That doesn't work. It's another extreme viewpoint to avoid anything, that you naturally need, like just because a book told you to do it. I mean, it's kind of weird. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of weird. But I mean, and people will torture themselves over this type of stuff, and it's like, I wonder, what it is about those few sentences that has such a hold on people. Like, there's not that much in the Bible about it. Like, I don't even think there's anything in the Bible about masturbation. Like, it's not even like a popular topic that comes up over and over again. Like, people take things like conversations around lust or adultery or like, I guess when I think it was Onan, right? He spilled his seed and didn't, ejaculate inside of the other person. So that, people take that to mean you shouldn't waste semen. I mean, not all of us have semen. So I don't even know where we're going with this, but it's like, we've all heard those beliefs. We're raised with these beliefs. And it's just interesting to me how gripping those few sentences have. I mean, if you take into consideration the amount of times love is mentioned compared to adultery or something that's not heterosexual type of sex, like, there's hardly anything at all in there. Like, the Bible's gigantic, and hardly any of that stuff is even in there. So, I'm kind of trying to take advantage of the fact that this episode is going to get banned, and so I'm trying to put everything in it so that I don't have to make multiple ones, because I don't want to get multiple things banned. But I know this one for a fact is going to get demonetized. But I don't know. I would always encourage people to ask a lot of questions. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I'm starting to believe this. I don't know. People are going to have a problem with this one. But I'm starting to believe that if I'm too comfortable with a thought process, and if someone else can be hurt by it, then I definitely need to do some deep diving soul searching on it. I don't think a lot of people think that way. I think a lot of people like to be set in their ideas and don't want to challenge things. And it's a problem. It's discomfort for them. They don't like to be, like, not knowing where their beliefs and opinions lie. I think it's good to get uncomfortable with maybe anything that has to do with culture. Culture evolves. There's definitely traditions and things for sure, but culture evolves. Humans evolve. I'm not talking about, like, evolution versus creation. I'm just saying, like, there was a certain point where, using sticks and rocks for things, and, wouldn't we say that technology has advanced since then? Like, we're able to do more stuff as humans now that we weren't able to do before because of technology. It helps us to evolve. But I do think we still have our human brains. We're still born with it. I think it takes a while for our brains to maybe catch up with what's going on in society. But there's definitely more of a push for equality lately, especially since the Rona, since all this type of stuff has been exposed with different, things with, like, Black Lives Matter and all these different types of things of injustices being exposed. I think, a lot of times people might need to look at this stuff. These reviewers might need to look at their internal biases. People who are, in charge of these platforms need to look at who's, in charge of these different algorithms, who's in charge of, the systems that weed out this person versus that person. Somebody wrote it purposely that way so that if someone like me versus someone like this other person posts something, it's going to get viewed differently based on my demographic. Not only that, that's not the only factor, but it's definitely a factor. It shouldn't have to be that way. They shouldn't be it's discrimination if you're taking cultural factors and sifting out based on a cultural factor. They're not sifting out based on legal issues. They're not sifting out based on, anything other than the fact that, if something is gay versus if it's not gay. And they've proven it because there's straight people who can go out there and do the same thing and nothing happens to their content. Same thing with the racial stuff. But somebody's allowing this to keep going on. I would say that a lot of these companies, these platforms need to take accountability and potentially consider who they're hiring. If they're hiring people who are censoring content, I don't know if I like that. That's not okay. Platforms can have rules and regulations, but I don't think they should censor based on cultural variables. I know sexuality is a bit of a taboo, controversial topic, but I think if a straight person can post it, then a gay person can post it. It doesn't make it it shouldn't have to be considered differently just because it's a gay person. And if a straight person is allowed to post it, like, why are they allowed to post it? Why aren't they getting banned? Same with the racial stuff. I'd like to know. People brush it under the table because they can. Programmers have a lot of power. That's basically what it is. And, we get manipulated at every angle. If you're of a minority group, you're definitely getting manipulated by the system on so many different levels. But it gets to a point where, this is people's money. They're playing with people's ability to make money. Basically, if you're a minority of different types, your ability to make money on these platforms is not equal to the ability of other groups, majority cultures to make money. And it's very obvious. And it's not okay. But it's probably going to continue, honestly, until, some of these class action lawsuits come to the forefront. But yeah, I was going to end this ages ago. It's almost 90 minutes, but hopefully you enjoy, because this is it's a longer one. I didn't want to split it into 3 segments and have 3 demonetized episodes, so sorry for the length, but hopefully it's worth it. Alright, thanks for listening.